Throughout history, the United States has faced moments where a single decision could change everything. We often remember the wars that were fought, the battles won and lost. But what about the wars that almost happened? The moments where the world held its breath, where a single misstep could have plunged nations into conflict. Some of these moments, these near misses of history, unfolded not in Europe or Asia, but much closer to home, in Latin America. These stories aren't about open combat, but about a high-stakes chess game played on the world stage, where the pieces were armies, economies, and entire nations. They are the stories of conflicts that never erupted, but came dangerously close. To understand these tense moments, we have to look back at the long and complex relationship between the United States and Latin America. For over a century, the US has viewed the region as strategically vital. It's not just about proximity. It's about resources, trade routes, and political influence. The Panama Canal, for instance, is a critical artery for global trade, and its security has always been a top US priority. This perspective, often framed by the Monroe Doctrine, established the Western Hemisphere as a US sphere of influence, a policy that has shaped interactions ever since. Stability in Latin America has always been seen as essential to US interests, not just politically, but economically and strategically. When a nation in the region experiences instability, it can create ripple effects that Washington feels compelled to manage. And in recent decades, few countries have captured this geopolitical attention quite like Venezuela. Why Venezuela? Well, it's a perfect storm of factors. First, oil. Venezuela sits on some of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. For a global economy that runs on energy, control over or access to those reserves is a massive geopolitical prize. Second, its location. Venezuela has a long Caribbean coastline, positioning it as a key player in maritime routes and regional security. This proximity to the US mainland makes its political alignment a matter of significant concern. And third, influence. Under different leaderships, Venezuela has actively sought to build alliances to counterbalance US power in the region, partnering with global rivals like Russia and China. This combination of oil, location, and a willingness to challenge the status quo has made Venezuela a central point of tension, a place where the strategic interests of global powers collide. This brings us to the moments of high tension. It's important to be clear. These were not acts of war. They were calculated moves within a broader global strategy, a form of pressure and posturing that stopped just short of open conflict. Let's start with economic sanctions. For years, the US has imposed increasingly tough sanctions on Venezuela's government and its state-owned oil company. The goal was to financially squeeze the ruling party, limit its access to international markets, and ideally trigger a change in leadership. From the Venezuelan perspective, this was seen as economic warfare. From the US perspective, it was a powerful, non-military tool to achieve a foreign policy objective. Every new round of sanctions raised the temperature, creating an atmosphere of economic siege. Then there was the rhetoric, The harsh diplomatic speeches. Words can be weapons, too. Leaders on both sides have used fiery language, accusing each other of everything from imperialism to tyranny. Speeches at the United Nations, press conferences, and even social media posts became battlegrounds for public opinion. Phrases like "all options are on the table" became a constant refrain from Washington. While this is standard diplomatic language to maintain leverage in the context of Venezuela, it was always interpreted as a veiled threat of military intervention. These words kept everyone, including allies and adversaries, on edge, wondering if and when they might be followed by action. It created a persistent drumbeat of potential conflict that hung in the air for years. Military movements also played a crucial role. While there was never an invasion, there were numerous instances of what could be called strategic signaling. The U.S. Navy conducted freedom of navigation operations in the Caribbean, close to Venezuelan waters. Joint military exercises were held with neighboring countries like Colombia and Brazil, nations that had their own tensions with Venezuela. These weren't routine training missions. They were carefully choreographed displays of military capability, designed to send a clear message without firing a single shot. They demonstrated that the military option, however unlikely, remained physically possible. Each movement was tracked closely, not just by Caracas, but by Moscow and Beijing, turning the Caribbean into a stage for global power projection. Finally, we have the international alliances. Venezuela didn't face this pressure alone. It actively courted support from U.S. rivals. Russian military advisors arrived in Caracas. Chinese loans helped keep the economy afloat. Iranian fuel tankers crossed the Atlantic to deliver gasoline, openly defying U.S. sanctions. Each of these moves was a counterplay. The arrival of Russian strategic bombers in Venezuela for joint exercises was a direct response to U.S. military posturing in the region. The Iranian fuel shipments were a demonstration that U.S. economic pressure could be bypassed. These alliances raised the stakes dramatically. A potential conflict was no longer just about the U.S., PLI, and Venezuela. It risked drawing in other major world powers, transforming a regional crisis into a global one. So, with all this pressure, all this tension, why did war never break out? This is where the story shifts from confrontation to calculation. What history shows is that restraint and strategy are often the most powerful tools for preventing war. The United States, despite the intense pressure and rhetoric, repeatedly chose calculated measures over direct, large-scale military confrontation. Why? Because the potential costs of an invasion were astronomical. A war in Venezuela would likely not have been a swift operation. It could have destabilized the entire region, triggered a massive refugee crisis, and entangled the U.S. in a prolonged and bloody conflict with no clear exit strategy. The economic fallout, especially on global oil markets, would have been severe. Instead of invasion, the U.S. opted for a multifaceted strategy of pressure, sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and support for the internal opposition. This approach valued patience and containment over the immediate gratification of force. It was a recognition that while the military is a powerful tool, it is not always the smartest one. This choice demonstrates a crucial aspect of American foreign policy. The ability to wield immense power is often defined not by when you use it, but by when you choose not to. This wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a strategic decision that a long-term pressure campaign, while slower and less dramatic, was ultimately the more effective and less costly path to achieving its objectives. The goal was to change the situation in Venezuela without firing a shot. And every day that passed without a war was, in its own way, a success for that strategy. And so we are left with an open ending, a lesson from the quiet corridors of power. History teaches us that the most dangerous moments are often the quietest ones, the ones that don't make the front pages until it's almost too late. The brink of war is a silent place, navigated by diplomats, strategists, and leaders making decisions that will never be fully known to the public. The story of the US and Venezuela is a powerful reminder that many of the biggest conflicts in modern history are the ones that never happened. They were averted not by chance, but by deliberate choices, by an understanding of consequences, and by decisions made behind closed doors. The chess game continues, and the world watches, hoping that dialogue and strategy will always win out over the call to arms. Thanks for watching. If you found this look into the untold stories of history interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay updated.